Okay, so to start with full turret service, you are going to want to take off all of the external stations here, um, just so that you can get to and remove the segments and then get under the turret itself. So I'm just going to kind of start removing all of those. And just as a good side note, when you're doing this, generally a good idea to just keep bolts you pull out of any specific section with those parts. A lot of them can be similar sizes, but they're different lengths and everything, so sometimes you mix stuff up and get it lost. So, personally, after I take this off, I will just put these back in without the pins here. Keep in mind just to disconnect the air hose on the ejection chute here, as well as the cleaning pins on this section when you're taking them off. Okay, so you just loosen the set screws on the ejection chute. Again, make sure to take out the air hose, and then it just slides off of these. If it's on there a little tight, sometimes I just use one of our Allen wrenches and just kind of pry it up a little bit because it is on there a little bit tight. And then we'll just get the cleaning and then remove the pins, and we'll go from there. This, just like the dust collector over there, it's just a set screw here that you loosen to pull it out. You don't need to loosen or touch those at all. And then for all three sets of pins here, you just remove the bolts here. When you put them back on, they are adjustable, and you will have to line up and make sure that they are coming through the segment bottom and top, because you can crash into these and damage them a lot. So also is a good idea, if your machine has them up partially through the segments, just jog it until they are coming down like this. Makes it a lot easier to get them off. And then you can kind of see where they're at before jogging it when you put them back on, so you know that they're not going to crash into anything. As you can see, all the pins of these are different. So these are for closing. They're kind of cupped there so that they don't dimple your capsules. These are your ejection, just the plain standard ones, and then with the air holes, these are your cleaning pins. Before we get to the segments, there is also here, there's a guard plate on the outside, and then inside there's another one. And that's something that's kind of out of the way, that doesn't look like it would be in the way, but you do need to remove it, so don't forget about that when servicing your turret. And it's just kind of like that. It'll slide up in there when you're putting it back on. So, okay, so next we're going to take off all of the segments. Typically, as you're taking these off, they're just pretty standard. All right, so after you get all the top and bottom segments off, next you just need to remove the cover here, and it's just held on with a couple of screws. Around the cover there should be a mark like this to line it back up when you put it back on. It's not just perfectly round, so you can find the holes that the screws go in when putting it back on. And then next, over every one of your carriers that is currently not at its lowest point, you need to put these blocks in. Yours might look a little different than this, but they should have come with the toolbox with the machine. And that's just so when we pull this off and put it back on, there's not extra pressure on those that doesn't need to be, so you don't damage anything. So then just loosen all your bolts, take those out, and you can take the turret off. Okay, so once you get the case off and all of those bolts out, you're just ready to take the turret off. Typically you're going to want someone to help you with this because they are pretty heavy. You can use the shafts as gripping points. They're not going to break or bend or anything. So yeah, just get an extra pair of hands and get in here, and you kind of have to move it back and forth some, but stuck a little. Okay, so after you got the turret off, you've got the cam in here, and it's got all of your old grease. You're going to want to clean that out just with a heavy degreaser. Just wipe every bit of it out in case it has any product or dust or whatever in there. And then you are going to re-grease it using food grade grease. Okay, so we got the cam all cleaned out. No more grease in there, so again, just get some food machinery or food grade grease and just start getting it back in the cam. Now, most of it should be on the walls where the bearings are going. You do want a little bit along the bottom, but most of it is along the sides. So like I said, you want the majority of it along the sides, a little bit in the bottom. I'm going to take some of the shop towels and clean this up on the top here so it's not over. But as you can see, this is a 14-ounce can, and I used about a quarter to a third of it. Depends on how generous you want to be. You can put more than this, but this looks like it's plenty. So, okay, so after you've taken care of your cam and it's been re-greased and everything, we've got the turret here. We just flipped it upside down so you can get to all the bearings and everything. To get started, you're going to want to take off the carriers, which are now down below, and just remove them so you can start getting to everything else. This will just slide out here. Got the springs on it. And then here you're going to have to undo these to loosen this and then get the actual other part of the carrier out. There's what your bottom segment's going on. Okay, so next, after we got, well, I guess the upper shaft, lower shaft when it's upside down, out, to get this one you have snap rings on this side of it, right up against there, and then another one over here. You want to get the outer one off first, which we've already loosened this one. They can kind of fight you for a little bit. Then we'll get the shaft out. We just use like a metric socket to tap on it, so you're not damaging it with anything like a punch, but you can still get some force behind it. So you tap out the shaft to a point that you can get this washer off, and then you'll remove your snap ring here. Take this off with your bearing. Now that we have both snap rings out in the washer, you can pull out this shaft as well. And then now, what you want to be checking is the bearings in here, out here, and within this that was holding the shafts. So what you want to do is take like a small pick or something, run it along the ball bearings in there, and just make sure that they're all sliding properly. If they are catching, if there's a few balls missing, things like that, you might need to replace your bearings, and just to make sure everything's still running smoothly. So you're going to want to do that for all 12 of your stations, and this can take a few hours. It's not a really quick job, but yeah, if you have any questions about it when you're doing it or whatever, give us a call. We're happy to guide you, give you pointers, go through stuff with you. But yeah, if after you make sure everything is good, which I'm going to do here, then we'll start putting it back together. Okay, so once you've gotten your bearings replaced and everything's changed out there, you're going to need to re-grease your bearings. So you've got the one here, again the one here, and then for the vertical shafts there's an upper and a lower on each side. So you just get your grease gun, and you're just going to make sure that they all are greased appropriately. Okay, so now that we got everything greased, we're ready to put everything back together. So first, with the shaft that we took out that had the snap rings on it, just keep in mind when you put it back in there, there is a shorter side and a longer side before the snap ring would go on. Side with the shorter snap ring goes on the inside of everything. So yeah, just when you're putting this back in, just make sure you've got it facing the right direction. This lock nut should be facing the same direction on every one. Just make sure, otherwise when you get it back in there you won't be able to adjust things properly from the spaces in the top. So okay, so putting the shaft back in again, you have your inner snap ring, you have this outer snap ring, and then the washer. And then you can just slide that back up until you get your snap rings in their respective slots again. So after you get that shaft on, you just slide this one back in. And in this case, we have the other ones already aligned, since we didn't take those off. Typically, you want to kind of try and line that up if you are only taking out a few of these, but if you're doing a full service, you're not going to have that luxury, so you're just going to tighten this, and then when you get it back on the machine, we will realign it. But for now, we're just going to tighten this bolt back down on the bottom. And then it's time to put the vertical shafts back in. The springs on there. Keep in mind this bearing goes on the outside. Your lock washer. And then your nut. And then just since it's going to be a little difficult to get these carriers back on from underneath like this, you've got to have some pressure on it to be able to get that in there. What I usually do is I take one of these and I'll lock up the other side of that and then flip over the turret and put those back on. So we'll do that really quick. And then you're ready to flip it over and get the carriers back on. Okay, so we got it flipped over, and we'll just put the carrier on, but also you can see in here there's a lot of excess grease on this shaft. Just since you grease the bearing within there, that'll happen. So, you know, you can clean that off at any time, but we'll do that and then, you know, just kind of wipe up the extra grease however you need. And then we'll go back over here and we'll put the carrier back on. Okay, and now that all your carriers are back on, we'll get it back on the machine, and then you will get everything realigned, re-leveled, and we'll start putting that back together. Okay, so now that I got a little bit of help putting the turret back on the machine, as you can see here, there's still a lot of space. It's not settled fully on the cam like it should be. Make sure you pay attention to where the pin is on the by the cam. I don't know if you can see in that hole where it is on the camera or not, but it's right there. Just make sure you're putting it on that, otherwise it won't go down. And like we did when we took this off, put the blocks back in on the sections that are going to be pressed up by the cam so that it's easier to get on. Now what you want to do is line up everything so that it's over this pin, and that all of the bearings on your carriers here are in the cam itself, within the cam's track. So get a flashlight or do it in a well-lit room, and you can move them until you can see. And I know you can't see very well with the camera, but you will be able to see the track itself, and you will just slide all of these until they're above that and kind of adjust them back and forth, and they will then drop in. So we're going to do that now. Okay, so now we got this back on here. Just make sure this is about your gap. Sometimes you could be adjusting these back and forth, sliding them in and out, and it looks like they're right above it, and they'll still kind of not be level. So just make sure that it's fully down like it should be, and then don't immediately start jogging the machine or anything like that to get it into the position to align things. Rotate it by hand for a couple rotations. Make sure things are working, that they're not bumping into anything else, because you could break stuff. So now on ours, again, we only adjusted 2 this time, so we have to get 2 over to the dosing disc so that we can align it. Just put your bolts back in, but don't tighten them down yet. So we're gonna have to align the turret now. You'll need a segment and some of your alignment pins. Let's get those. So you get a bottom segment in there. Here are the alignment pins. Make sure you're using the right ones and that you're using the right size for whatever your segments are, in case you have multiple. So they just drop in the sides there, and the idea is that you're supposed to be able to slide it up into the slot that the tamping pins go into. Also, you need to remove this station off of the dosing and the tamping head to be able to align these properly. So take this one back out, and then we'll rotate it over here, and we will align this. We will align the turret to this, and then fully tighten down the turret. So. So to rotate your machine by hand, underneath you'll just have the motor here. It'll show what direction you need to go forward. You're going to want to have the power on all the same, because you want to turn the brake on. It makes it a lot easier, and it puts a light down here. So down here is your brake. Some machines don't have one of these. It'll just be on your monitor like it always is. That'll turn the light on, and it'll just make it a lot easier to rotate this by hand. What I would typically do is, if you want to, is wait until, just until the segment has stopped moving, like this almost looks, because you might be off a little bit. Wait until the tamping head is down, right there. You know then that it is lined up like it should be, and it's for sure not moving between stations anymore. So that's the position you want it to be in, and then we'll come up here and then align it. It can help, again, to have a flashlight to get down in the tamping pin holes if you can't see the pins or anything like that, to see where you're off. If you have enough light, you might not need that, but that's just helpful. So you come in here, and I'm sliding, and it's, you know, making almost a clicking noise as it's hitting there.
and from above you can see how far off you are. Now this one is off left and right, so I need to rotate the whole disc a little bit, whole turret. And then it can still be off as far as how far in and out this is. So in this case, I got it lined up left to right. I now need to have the segment and the carrier come out just a little bit more. So you go back in here to your open slot, loosen this up, and you can adjust that. Okay, so after you fight this for a while, which you might have to do, you can see down here the alignment pins go up and they will go into the dosing disc a little bit, and they should come out easily as well. Make sure both can, that one's not, you know, tight or anything like that to the point that you can't move it. If it's got a little bit of snugness, and you're okay, but you just have to make sure that both can go in and out. And then when you've got that, just tighten down the bolts for the turret. Now again, if you've done, and this you want to do in a star pattern. Okay, if you've done more than one carrier, you are going to have to align these all at this point, just to make sure that they go out at the proper amount, which would require adjusting this. So remember, when you're rotating this, to be able to align it to the dosing disc, you do have to take the blocks out. Again, rotate it manually. First time, make sure that you're not bumping into anything, but you do want the blocks out so that you don't mess with anything. And then we're just going to rotate over to our station that we adjusted, and we will start aligning it. So when you're rotating to get a segment in place to be able to align it, don't jog the machine. You can cause a crash. As you can see, this is not level, and if I had it up enough, I could crash it into the dosing disc, and we don't want to cause any problems with that. So you've got your brake down here or on your console of the machine. Just turn that on and then rotate it by hand to get it in position. And again, you want this head to be down, just so you know that it's in place where it's supposed to be and not somewhere in between, trying to still get in position. So it then you could potentially think it looks like it's in position, but it's not. This way you just are assured that it is where it's supposed to be when you are aligning this. So you loosen this bolt on the top shaft to be able to have this slide in and out, and currently that's all you are aligning at this point. Again, you can put a flashlight up above so you can see down in there if you need, if you have enough light. You may not need to do that, but okay, both of those are going in and out relatively smoothly, so we're going to tighten that down. Make sure it's still smooth, and we're good there. So now we'll pull it around and we will level the segments. The next thing, after you get everything aligned with the disc here as far as distance goes, is you need to re-level your carriers. So with that, you should have a parallel that came with your machine in the toolbox.
And what you'll do is you'll just lift this and put it in the space in between there. And then, depending on your machine, you will either loosen here, and I believe some have a bolt facing in here that you loosen, and that will let the bottom swivel. And then you will retighten it so that it levels with your parallel. You can technically do this at any of this station or the following three, but it is easiest to get to this right here. So once it's been, and this one seems to already be fairly leveled, just make sure once you tighten it back up that it doesn't, it can twist it one way or the other a little bit. So be careful after you tighten it. Don't automatically assume that it's level because the parallel was in there. You want to slide the parallel out on both the left and right side, and if you feel the same amount of pressure, then you should be good. You can then lift this up, pull your parallel out, rotate to your next station, and continue doing that. Okay, so once you have aligned all of your carriers and you've re-leveled them, just before you put the segments back on, remember to put this back in here. Safety ramp just goes by the track, and after you put the safety ramp on, you are going to want to rotate it manually again, because if the safety ramp is off or bent or whatever, again, you could crash things. So then you put this case on the outside after you've got your safety ramp on. And then finally, you're going to start putting your segments back on, and you are going to align the top segment to the bottom segment. Now, to align these, you are going to want to do them at these three stops where the closing pins would be the ejection, or the closing the ejection, and then the cleaning would be. Just because that's where the tops and the bottoms will line up, and you also have easy access to them with everything dismantled like it currently is. So, easiest way to do this is probably to tighten these down, not so that they're tight, but so you hit the point where they don't want to move, and then you just loosen them just a hair, so you can still move this top segment. Then you get your segment alignment pins and put them in the outermost two. If you're dealing with an 1800 or 2000 and you have two rows, I would typically put one in the far corner of one row and then the next row over opposite corner, just so you get it aligned as best you can. And you want to make sure that they go in and out fairly smoothly, and that the pins can spin. And you tighten it down that last little hair so it doesn't move so much. And then to just double check that when you tightened it, it didn't get out of alignment. Test these two, and then you can put your pin in each hole of the segment, and then that's aligned. And you can go around and do that for every one of your stations, and you should be good at that point. Once you've got everything aligned again, all of your segments are back on and aligned with from top to bottom and everything, it's time to put the cover, the tamping pins, and the stations back on.
With the with the cover, you can actually put that on before you start aligning these. It's a good idea to put it on whenever you can, just so you don't drop stuff down in here, because it's obnoxious to get out. So we'll put that back on now though. When you're doing this, remember each hole lines up specifically at a spot, so there's going to be a mark around the edge of your cover somewhere. Looks like on this one it's right here, and it will match up with along the edge here. There should be another mark, which for us is right there. Pins back in their appropriate stations here. Ejection. And as you can see, these slide back and forth. Just make sure that if you come up here, make sure that they are centered in these holes, so that when they come up, you're not going to have issues with them hitting the sides of the segment holes and scraping them up and scratching them, or hitting the bottom. That can cause problems. So, and you just eyeball it. There's nothing. It's nothing very meticulous or anything like that, but just make sure you're paying attention to that when you put them in. So once you've gotten the pins for all three stations back on, the last step would just be put your closing ejection and then vacuum chute here back on. With each of these, the closing, after you put it on, just make sure you readjust it so that this is above all of the holes on the segment, and so it's close but not actually touching the top of the segment. And then just on these, the ejection chute shouldn't have any adjustments that you need to do, but reattach your air hose. And the vacuum chute here for the cleaning should be pretty close to the segment as well. Again, not touching, but close there, so that it picks up all the extra stuff that these clean out. And again, attach your air hose here. So after that, remember to rotate it by hand. Just test it before you start running things, and you should be good to go. In case we didn't mention this earlier in the video, you do have to adjust this over here so that it will suck up capsules if this ejects bad capsules, but don't have it low enough that it sucks up the tops of capsules if they're good. So there's no real set height that we have for that. You just kind of have to test with a couple empty capsules and double check that and make sure that it's okay. But after that, you should be good, and you've got your turret service finished, and you can get back to running your product.